Okay, Justin Paperny coming to you from a very windy day in San Diego, here to support a good friend and client who's about to get sentenced for some insider trading, market manipulation. Apparently, if you're a politician, you can insider trade without consequence, though if you are a regular person, expect the feds to come calling. It's been a 3-year process for our client, and in many ways, just so thrilled to finally get clarity today and get sentenced, which could include federal prison. He fully understands that because the sentencing guidelines are 24 to 31 months. Of course, we've done everything I think we can to try to get a shorter sanction. Interesting case here. Our client for 30 years had a stellar, successful career, and a very close friend, he doesn't blame anyone, but a very close friend of his who was caught in a separate case began cooperating with the government, and in a recorded phone call, his co-defendant gave information to our client. Our client acted on the information, and from that, the feds were listening. Bad things happened. They immediately arrested him. He spent a few days at the Metropolitan Detention Center or the MCC here in San Diego, and after 3 long years, he's facing a sentencing hearing. Our client is incredible, even expressing empathy for his former best friend who cooperated against him, because he said he's trying to do everything he can to keep himself out of prison. I understand my bad decisions are my bad decisions. I don't blame anybody but myself. That's such a refreshing and different perspective, because frequently people will say some snitch, some cooperator got me into this mess. It's not my fault, it's his. So it's a very refreshing perspective, and I sense that the judge is going to be appreciative of that. Though I'm not psychic, we'll know in about 30 or 40 minutes. I'm heading up to the courtroom. Back in a moment. Okay, this is what I like to call a 2-for-1 special. When I headed into the courtroom, my client had a co-defendant with whom he did not know, also getting sentenced to as part of this scheme. And so I had an opportunity to hear this defendant's lawyer articulate why he thought his client was worthy of probation. And most of the time, lawyers just ask for probation. Even when it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years the government's requesting, the lawyers will ask for probation. It's certainly something you should discuss with counsel, because sometimes the chasm or gap is so big, it doesn't make sense to ask for probation. In this case, the sentencing guidelines for this defendant were 24 to 31 months in prison. Yes, at times I can be critical of lawyers. In fact, recently our team got a call from a lawyer that said, I love your videos, I love what you do, but sometimes you're critical of lawyers. Why? I can tell you why, because of what I heard from this first defendant's lawyer. It felt as if this was the first time he went through what he was going to tell the judge. He walked up. I hate to say it, it reminded me of the movie My Cousin Vinny, when the lawyer gets up and he stutters and ums and ahs, and then he sits down and he taps his client on the shoulder like, I got this. He stood up, wasn't prepared. Your Honor, give me a moment. I'm sorry. Then he said, this has been devastating for my client. This has really impacted his life. Again, all things that are true, yet I don't think it's the right message to a judge who opened up by talking about victims in this case. People who lost money, people whose dignity has been impacted. The rest of their lives will be different as a result of this defendant's conduct. Yet the lawyer, who I don't feel was prepared, opens up by talking about how his client's life was imploding. I think it was the wrong message to open at the wrong time. And I could tell this lawyer hadn't role-played with his lawyer. So many lawyers will not role play. I use the analogy of a football game. They practice during the week. A golf tournament, they play a practice run on Wednesday before the tournament opens on Thursday. Role play with your lawyer. What are you going to say? How are you going to say it? What is the path and plan at sentencing? I can tell that hadn't happened here. Throughout that first sentencing hearing, the lawyer continually discussed how this client had really been in the dungeon for 3 years while on home confinement. Did a good job, I think, of telling the judge, while the Bureau of Prisons will not give him custody, will not give him credit, I think we should recognize that he has been in the dungeon. There has been a significant consequence to this, and while we asked the court to consider that at sentencing, spoke at length about his background and family and children, the fact that he will be deported because he's a Canadian citizen, and then said some things that I thought were interesting in trying to buoy his case for why he should get probation. He said his co-defendant, our client, who they don't know, he's going to go to a camp, and it's going to be fun in this camp. He's not even going to be locked up in this camp. There's no fences or anything there. He could basically leave at any time. So he's going to be able to go to a camp, but our client's going to go to a violent, low security prison, and he's going to be fenced in. And because he's really going to be locked up, and this dude really isn't going to be locked up, we think that's more the reason that you should mitigate and give a sentence of probation. The judge wasn't a buyer at these levels, so to speak, and the judge spoke at length, really about the length of the fraud. Now, he did say it was 5 or 6 or 7 months that it went on, and in my experience, it didn't seem like such an extended period of time. I mean, some white-collar crimes go on for years and decades. So when he started saying 5, 6, or 7 months, initially I thought it would be to the benefit of the defendant, because it didn't seem that long to me, yet the judge said that is a very long period of time, longer than I am comfortable with, and it doesn't speak simply to out of character, it's more of a sustained period of time, and I'm not fully convinced that you've given enough appreciation to that. I have. That's going to factor into my sentence because I'm going to be sending your client to prison. I found the conduct of the U.S. attorney to kind of have bad bedside manner, so to speak, while the defense attorney was speaking, and I think he turned it around after the opening a little bit of focusing only on the defendant. While he was speaking and articulating why he thought his client was worthy of probation, you have the defense attorney shaking his head, biting his pencil. I found it to be very inappropriate. I've been to sentencing hearings in front of Judge Carter where Judge Carter has reprimanded the defense, the U.S. attorney for their behavior. So I thought the U.S. attorney's conduct was a little over the top, unprofessional. When he didn't like something that he heard, you should just sit there and keep your mouth shut. It's the defense attorney's job to articulate why his client's worthy of leniency. I thought the defendant's sentencing statement on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give it a 2.5. Why? It just focuses on himself. Your Honor, this has been devastating for my family and for my children. In retrospect, I would do things differently. I've really suffered over the last few years. I didn't mean to end up here. Things that are true. Where are the victims? Which is the only thing the judge was discussing, the victims. So if you are going to have a sentencing statement that doesn't focus on the victims, here's some advice to you. To say nothing. Keep your mouth shut. When the judge asks you if you'd like to speak, unless it's only going to fixate and focus on the victims, the answer should be, no, I'm not going to say anything, Your Honor. But if you are going to speak, victims, 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 then you can talk about how your conduct has led to your own life imploding and all of the consequences that accompany that. With that said, let's now transition to our client. Our client had a sentencing range of 24 to 31 months. I think it's somewhat helpful to have his co-defendant, who he did not know. Again, this was not the person that cooperated against him. That person has yet to be sentenced because he's brought a lot of other people into the case. I think it was helpful to have his co-defendant go in front of him because you got a sense of what the judge was going to do. And that first defendant ended up getting 17 months in federal prison. He will go to a low security prison. The judge acknowledged he's likely to get deported because of this case back to Canada. Judge was not a buyer that the security level should factor into him getting probation, even made a comment about the camp compared to the low. So clearly the judge had some experience or understanding of the Bureau of Prisons and recognizing that even if you're in a camp, you're locked up and you're confined, it is not home confinement or the halfway house. The judge made that comment. Our client's lawyer did an excellent job in the opening of speaking directly about the victims. So either he was prepared to do that or he heard the judge talk at length about the victims. So our client's lawyer did a terrific job, prepared, no ums, no ahs, no stutters, immediately opened by discussing why our client knew that it was wrong. And from the day that he learned that he was arrested, he said, I accept responsibility. I deserve to be held accountable. I've been a successful executive for more than 30 years. I knew that it was wrong. I should be punished. The judge appreciated and commented on that, as did the U.S. attorney, in recommending why our client's sentence should be 15 months instead of federal prison, instead of the 24 to 31 months per the sentencing guidelines. So the work that our client did from the day that he got in trouble, of saying, I did it, I knew better, led immediately to the government saying, we don't have to invest the resources in this guy, in this case. He's going to accept responsibility. For that reason, we're going to recommend a shorter sentence. So we knew going in the government was asking for 15 months. Throughout the lawyer's presentation, he focused on the victims, but also spoke about our client's character, what he had done in the community, and did something I think was very effective and something that our client did by way of his personal narrative. Our client was authentic, meaning in the narrative, he spoke about privilege that he had, the success and tens of millions of dollars that he made as a businessman. and recognized that he had opportunities that others in that courtroom did not have. Spoke at length about volunteering through Prison Professors, our nonprofit organization, to contribute to more than 100,000 people in prisons and jails every single year. And his lawyer said, Your Honor, I want to make clear, we did not initiate the volunteer work. We did not even suggest that he do it. That's something that he initiated on his own, and he is clearly committed to continuing to give back. And regardless of the sentence that you give today, we hope that you'll include some community service, because he is committed to giving back for the rest of his life and making amends. The judge appreciated this message because the judge said, you are right. I can't ever justify someone breaking the law, but there are people who end up in this courtroom who steal because they don't have any food, who break the law because they're practically homeless or they're drug addicts, and they have known nothing but struggle throughout their whole life. So I can't justify it, the judge says, but I can understand it. And I appreciate that you acknowledge that that is not you. The judge said there are people who have myriad felonies who don't care about the felony, who only care how much time they're going to get. And I want you to know that I know this is a significant punishment for you. And I know that you've been a good executive. You've given back to your community. I've read the letters. I read the narrative. I am impressed with what you have done throughout your life, but it doesn't change that you are here. It doesn't change that you broke the law, and I don't understand why you did it. I don't understand how you are here given how much success you've had as an executive. And I want you to know that I appreciate you accepting responsibility. I appreciate you acknowledging that many people have no excuse but to end up in this courtroom. You did not have that excuse. And I want you to know that, losing my train of thought here for a moment, I'm going through what the judge said. I want you to know that I know you're going to have the scarlet letter on your chest for the rest of your life. While many people in here who have felonies don't care, I know you do, but I know you can be successful. I know that you can make it, but I recognize the punishment that's going to come and that you're enduring, and you're going to have the scarlet letter on you for the rest of your life. It is a stain that will follow you forever. Given everything the judge said, our client spoke. His sentencing statement was eloquent, immediately focused on the victims. That's all, not how my life is imploding, my children, all that good. I created victims, Your Honor. I traded on inside information. I deserve to be held accountable. I'm going to spend the rest of my life making amends, not through talk, but by action. I'm sorry, and whatever happens here today, I will accept it with dignity and move on. Judge 2 appreciated that statement and gave our client not 15 months, not 24 to 31 months, which were the sentencing guidelines. He gave him a year and a day in federal prison. Then said, I'm going to give you more than 2 months to surrender. I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. So 2 sentencing hearings today. One defendant got 17 months. Our client's got a year and a day, probably on that, out of there in 5 or 6 months, I would say. And we just hugged and celebrated after the sentencing hearing. And he said, I'm just so grateful to have clarity. I've been in the dungeon for 3 years. And when our client and I began working together, I said something in a YouTube video like, the guilty plea is harder than the sentencing because you don't have clarity, right? You're in limbo. The sentencing day is much better because you get clarity. And the first thing he said to me was, you know what, man, it's crazy. Today's better than the guilty plea, like you said, because I have clarity. I can plan for the next phase. To close, hold your lawyer accountable. Role play with your lawyer. Make sure you review the sentencing memorandum. Make sure your narrative is well written. Your statement is on point. Make sure you are giving consideration to what sort of prison term you're going to ask for. Right? If the government's asking for 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, is it logical to ask for probation? In this case, the judge wasn't a buyer and the gap wasn't even that big. Please like and subscribe if you find value in these videos. Our team is so grateful to be on the journey with people who trust us, and I look forward to doing more work and potentially a video with our client in the coming days and weeks. Be well, hold that lawyer accountable. Bye-bye.